Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to build a secure IoT solution with Azure. My name is Chris Chandler. I am the Microsoft Alliance Manager here at Grey Matter, and I have the pleasure of taking you through the agenda as well as talking you through a bit of housekeeping before handing over to our speakers. So in terms of the agenda, first we're going to start off in terms of you have my welcome and introduction. Then what I will do is hand over to Ella from Microsoft to be talking digital transformation, my colleague Mark Finch to talk about customer stories, then handing over to another colleague of mine, Mark, as well as Rich from Microsoft, and then back to me to talk about a very exciting new program that Grey Matter has developed in conjunction with Microsoft. In terms of housekeeping today, as it says on the screen there, we'll be sharing, this session is being recorded, we will share it with you in follow-up, as well as any links that are talked about throughout today's session. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A section. The icons along the bottom of your screen will give you access to that chat, as well as the post survey, as well as other information. Before I hand over to Ella, I just wanted to take a quick opportunity to check in with the audience, and if you could please select one of the following in terms of where you are in your IoT adoption, so whether that's discovery or proof of value. We'll just take a 30-second pause for people to do that. Okay, great. So thank you to those of you that have submitted. I do appreciate you taking the time to do that. We do have another question later on in the throughout the session, so your feedback is really appreciated. So as you can see, almost 70% of you are in discovery phase, and 30% of you are actually getting more involved. So at this point, I'm really excited and take the opportunity to pass over to Ella from Microsoft, and Ella's role is business development lead for IoT. So in terms of getting your questions into Ella around the commercial aspects of IoT adoption, please do take the opportunity to do so in the Q&A, but we'll also turn to time at the end. So Ella, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here, everyone. Thanks for spending the time with us this afternoon. As Chris said, my role is very commercial business development here at Microsoft, focused on IoT, and I have the pleasure of working very closely with Grey Matter on that. I wanted to share with you today, just in terms of a bit of a scene set around the way that Microsoft think about IoT, and we really think about IoT as being one of the core technologies to really underpin digital transformation for most organisations. And you may or may not be aware that there are really 4 commonly understood steps of digital transformation, as you can see on this slide, starting with business insights, moving to operational efficiencies, new business models, and then additional features and revenue streams. And in the context of IoT, I wanted to just take some time to explain that a little more to you. So when we look at the business insights, that's really probably actually the core element of what people think about when they think about IoT, in terms of just thinking just about the sensors, just about connecting up the things, and then gathering that data to provide insights. And there's loads of value in doing that, and that's absolutely, an important part of consideration when you're building an IoT solution. But as we move more into kind of how we find those operational efficiencies, this gets to the point where we think about how we use that data and how we use those insights to enable us to understand more effectively what is going on with the things that we have connected. And, that could be, a machine, for example. It could be, an asset such as a vehicle, and being able to use the sensors to get that data so that we can start to build a predictive maintenance model and start to gather data from a number of different machines that are doing the same. And we can start to really predict, okay, based on the behavior of this machine, for example, we think it's likely to have a break or have a problem at this date in the future, and therefore we can send someone out to deal with that ahead of time. So that's the sort of operational efficiencies part. That often then builds into actually being able to create a new business model, because, and I'll talk through some examples on this in a moment, because many customers have found that when they've started to create those operational efficiencies, that's enabled them to build more of a, I guess, what we would call an as-a-service type model to deliver to their customers. So they're no longer necessarily providing just a machine or just a piece of hardware or just a piece of software, but actually providing a much greater services wrap around it as well. And then that finally translates to additional features and potentially new revenue streams as people find that the solution that they have built for themselves actually is particularly applicable to other customers, both in their industry and outside of their industry, that want to do different things, and that enables them to bring additional revenue. So I'll just give you a couple of examples to bring this to life a bit more, and then I'll be handing over to the next speaker. So in terms of business insights, I want to talk to you about Cloverleaf. So Cloverleaf actually was traditionally a device partner, and they built a solution which is called ShelfPoint, which is effectively an interactive point of sale solution for digital signage. And they sell this to customers who have any kind of digital signage or fridges in a retail store environment. And so one of the customers they sold that to was a customer that sells beer, and they bought the digital signage for their beer, and it enabled them to do really at a base level a couple of things. One, to be able to promote different offerings based on the time of year or the seasonality, so they could list different promotions. But two, to be able to see the proximity of a shopper to that beer fridge and to be able to provide the relevant information at the time that they wanted to provide it. And then they use cameras to be able to get the feedback in real time to how those customers were responding to those particular promotions and be able to change them. And that really meant that they could get very to the moment data around the offers they were running and potentially change them mid-promotion cycle if they needed to, versus having to wait until the end of the promotion and then decide what to do. Another example in terms of, I guess, moving on to the more sort of operational efficiencies would be Amazon. So Amazon have a solution called PlantWeb. It's a digital ecosystem, and it basically pairs experts with from Amazon with technology and insights that are hosted in Microsoft Azure that enable them to take data from plant equipment in a factory, and they get real-time operating data from, you know, anything that's affecting any kind of part of the plant's operations. So that could be valves or steam traps or pressure gauges, or temperature monitors, or anything else that is really aiding the running of that factory, and pulling all of that information together and then converting it into that kind of predictive intelligence to drive prescriptive action is what's really enabled them to drive significant operational efficiencies and to provide this to their customers so that they can achieve the same. And then as we think about new business models, I'll talk about Dover. So Dover Fueling Solutions, they are a global supplier of fuel dispensing equipment, so petrol pumps, which I guess we're all pretty familiar with at the moment. Feels like a topical one to be talking about here in the UK. And they effectively have connected up those fuel dispensing systems, so those petrol pumps, and they are gathering telemetry all the time from those pumps. And they process that through IoT Hub into Azure, and then they use that to work out when they need to go and do a predictive maintenance. And from doing that, that's meant that they've started to deliver a kind of petrol pump as a service offering to their customers. So versus just being the people that provide the pump and they just get called when something goes wrong, they are now the people providing the insights to the station, to the petrol station. They can say pump number 4 is looking like it's going to have an issue in the next couple of days, maybe direct traffic to pumps 1, 2 and 3. They have also started to use it for interactive promotion, so as a kind of point of sale point while people are stood there filling up the pump. So lots of options there for them to find I guess new business models more advanced than just providing the kit that they were doing before. And then finally, and this is actually probably my favourite because I think this is the most interesting use of of one organisation to drive something that is not what they are created for. So the Swedish Transport Administration wanted to understand the state of the roads in Sweden so that they could identify which roads they should prioritise for resurfacing. And really there was three ways to do that, right? They could have gone with a very high cost approach of just sending staff out, sending contractors out to assess the roads. Or they considered, could they create a solution where they put cameras on trucks and use computer vision for people to go and drive the trucks up and down the road and for them to check. And then what they realised was, actually there was an organisation that probably already had this data that could help them. So Volvo was obviously the largest auto manufacturer in Sweden, and they were already using sensors in their vehicles to monitor the tyre and road friction. And they were doing that for the purpose of predicting when they would need to maintain tyres, and how they could then proactively to their customers say, your tyre is going to need maintaining within the next 2 or 3 months, it's going to need replacing, please book in for a service. And actually what they realised that through doing that is that they were getting a much better view of Sweden's roads and the quality of the roads than they had thought. And so they had effectively a whole heat map that they were then able to share with the Swedish Transport Administration and give them the ready-made insights that they were looking for. And we very much see this as a trend where you see data insights from one application or an industry ends up providing significant business value to another, and allowing generation of new revenue streams as a result. So that's the kind of perfect utopia of digital transformation with IoT. Hopefully that made sense. Do let me know if you've got any questions. As Chris said, you can pop them in the chat, or we can do that towards the end of the call. I think we have time for that. But I think I'm handing over to Mark Finch now, who's worked on a similar story with one of Greymatter's customers. I'm going to talk you through that. So Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Ella. Yeah, some great use cases there, but I just wanted to share with you how Greymatter and one of its partners, Enterprise Software Group, or ESG, enabled a customer, one of our customers, Hydrojaws, to gain data insights through Azure IoT. So a bit about Hydrojaws first. These guys develop and manufacture a range of portable devices, and these devices test the holding force of anchors and fixing points in construction materials. So if you imagine an anchor point to fix a harness for a worker who's maybe working high up on a building, you need to be confident that that anchor point is stable, and the tools that they develop and manufacture test that strength. Now, their existing mobile application estate was becoming quite difficult to maintain, and it couldn't be integrated with their wider estate. So there was a need to make improvements. So Greymatter and ESG were able to help them achieve this objective. So first thing was that we were able to identify that thousands of devices around the globe were producing similar data, but there was no aggregation of or reporting of that data taking place. And to add to that, there was no restrictions on who was able to use the applications or use the test equipment. So both of these factors had the potential to inhibit their revenue generation. Solution was to leverage the Azure IoT platform. IoT Hub was adopted to provide a centralized workflow for the ingestion of all this data. So by centrally capturing all data related to the pull tests being conducted, a rich data set was built, and this provided fantastic opportunities for reporting. IoT Hub also enabled Hydrojaws to protect their commercial interests by restricting access to the infrastructure on a per device basis. IoT Hub also provides data updates to mobile applications, harnessing the bidirectional messaging capabilities that the IoT platform offers. By choosing Greymatter as their direct CSP, Hydrojaws were able to consume Azure IoT Hub, but also receive support to optimize their Azure consumption. So now Hydrojaws has a rich and expanding data set from which they can derive insights to provide to the industry. And this improves safety records for their customers and provides future opportunities for predictive analytics. All of this driven by IoT-derived data. So, without further ado, I will hand you over to our architectural design session. Your hosts are Richard Jones, who is Microsoft's IoT architect for EMEA, and Mark Trippier, who's our technical business consultant at Cloud Know-How. Over to you guys. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mark. The reason why we're going to step into the architectural design session as part of these slides is because it's an integral part, obviously, to making sure you get the right solution delivered. So I'm going to just talk you through basically what is the architectural design sessions to give you a flavour of some of the process that you'll go through as part of our Kickstart programme. So if we start with what is an ADS, or an architectural design service, I like to see it as a marriage of minds. It's designed to provide a structured method to align business needs with technology. It identifies the key stakeholders, the business requirements, and the measurements of success, and identifies where technology can help deliver this. It will also ensure the success of your project. The ADS is divided into two sections: the business requirement and then the technical design. I'll be covering the business element today, followed by Richard from Microsoft, who will discuss the technical elements of IoT solutions and delve a little bit into Business Central and some of the sensors. So what is an ADS? The ADS is a program led by a business consultant and an IoT architect. It's designed to cover several elements. So the business element, it'll look at the high-level business drivers, define the required benefits, understand the business volumetrics, investigate the areas of the business that will benefit, understand the personas involved and how they will interact with the solution, and it will define your time requirements. The technical element, which is usually a bit more interesting, is going to discuss the high-level architecture. It'll understand compliance and security requirements. It'll give you an opportunity to discuss the individual component requirements, understand data flows, storage and consumption, investigate internal technical abilities from your side to see where we can work with you to actually help you deliver it. It'll review and prioritize the KPIs, and it'll end up with developing a roadmap which will help you plan to POV and beyond if necessary. So why an ADS? It really is essential to help ensure the success of the project. It'll ensure that technology will deliver the business requirement. It'll define clearly the deliverables. It'll provide a structured approach. It'll identify the KPIs and measurables so that you can monitor how successful your solution is in the design right through to the POV stage. And it'll help you achieve the roadmap that you need to actually prove that your ideas work. So typical ADS flow. Obviously, there's the preparation. This is ensuring that we get the correct attendees and making sure they're present. We need people that know the business requirement, understand the growth and adoption requirements, and understand the security and compliance requirements. For the execution, this is broken down into two sections. The morning will cover the business and commercial drivers, and the afternoon is where we discover what technologies will fit this and exactly where your architecture is likely to look. The follow-up is where we'll deliver back to you a high-level architectural design document. Based on that document, we'll be able to analyse the running costs for the architecture based on the volumetrics and the scale that we found out during the architectural design session. We'll be able to provide you with a roadmap for exactly which stages and what you need to do to get to proof of value, also beyond if you're looking at minimal viable product or releasing your full value product. And we can also look at, obviously, different plans for how you get to your proof of value. So to try and explain some of the areas covered in the business area, we're going to use a fictitious company that we've been given, which is Contoso, in flavour with everything Microsoft-like. And we're going to use them as an example of an ADS. So typically, Contoso provide containers for transportation of food and medical supplies worldwide. We're going to use this example to show you who would attend the ADS from Contoso's point of view and what their roles are for this specific case. We'll demonstrate the business benefits and opportunity. We'll provide some examples of volumetrics to give you an idea of the type of information that we're going to be trying to ascertain as part of the ADS. And we'll look at the delivery scenarios and ultimately understand the personas and their requirements. So the first bit, which is the most important part, is the vision statement. The reason that we need a vision statement is it will give us a high-level overview and an understanding of exactly what your core drivers are, what your model is, what you're actually delivering to your customers. And it's a great way of focusing exactly where we want to start the ADS. So in this case, obviously, you can read exactly what they do, and it's just a high-level overview. If we look at the business benefits, opportunities and benefits, essentially this is where we start to drill into exactly what the application is going to deliver, why, how, in what order. It gives us a starting point really for how we design the solution to work for you. So as you can see for this instance, we're looking at temperature reports, service cost reductions, container environment and the journey, intrusion and theft, etc. And it's really to nail down the different elements of this solution that need to be delivered to add value. So as you start looking at the high level details, if we take, for instance, container intrusion and theft, obviously containers are occasionally broken into. They'd like to know exactly when and where it's happening because it could be on a partner's watch. They also would like to know whether there's any imagery from it. So can we identify what's happened and why? And then obviously from the next point of it is who's the beneficiary. So obviously both the company and the end customer benefit because there's a level of security included there, and it will probably help reduce loss and liability. So there's obviously a monetary benefit there as well. The advantage of setting it out in this way is it enables you to prioritize the scenarios so that when it comes to your proof of value and potentially your minimal viable product, you can actually start addressing the areas of the solution that will bring best benefit and most value to you first. The next area that we look at is business volumetrics. Business volumetrics, it helps us to look at the current scale of your application, where your future scalability requirements are going to be based on the business growth plans, based on your adoption plans, based on exactly what drivers you've got to take this to market. It gives us a chance to also have an understanding of some of the workflows and integrations and to look at the frequency and timeframes involved for actually bringing some of these areas in. So if we look at the examples there, for instance, when we look at the first one, customers, we know that there's approximately 500 initially coming on board, and you're looking to increase this by double over the next 2 years. So again, making sure that the system will cope with that. And because you're looking at potentially high value food products and pharmaceuticals, it'll start giving some ideas about where we can add extra value to where some of this information can be monetized going forwards. When we look at scenarios is drilling a little bit deeper into exactly what some of these reports are going to do and exactly what the solution is going to provide. So when we drill into the detail, the important bit is who's going to consume it for us. So who's going to benefit? What are they doing? How's it going to work? This gives us an understanding of some of the integration and dependency on other systems. It'll help us understand the types of sensors that are potentially required. It'll give us an idea about the types of storage of data and the volume of data that will be required, and also obviously how it's going to be consumed. So there's just a few examples there for the different provisions. Obviously from container maintenance, intrusion detection, slightly different requirements and slightly different people using it. And all of that needs to be taken into account when you're designing the data flows and storage for your solution. The next place we look at, and the final place for me, is the personas. Obviously, there's different people that are going to interact with this, and the information needs to be provided in a way that will help them achieve their goals. So when we actually look at this, for instance, the data scientist, we know that because they're going to run AI, ML, potentially dashboards and other spreadsheets and things against the data to find their predictive analytics, they're going to need a high quantity of data. So rather than storing that in expensive hot storage, so your most expensive premium disks, you normally would look at a Lambda type architecture, putting that on the cheapest storage possible because of the volume and how frequently it's going to be accessed. In turn, also you've got the COO. He's looking at an aggregate of warm data because he's looking for an overview of exactly what everything's doing at the moment, how it's working. It's probably going to be some kind of dashboard, maybe delivered from Power BI, for example. He's going to view it on his laptop and phone. So again, we'd be storing that in a slightly different place, probably with the history of the last 30 days or the journey of this one particular container if he was drilling down into a particular shipment, just so that he's got everything at hand. And that gives us the kind of business understanding for where we can start mapping the technology onto it, which is where I will hand over to Richard, who is the IoT architect for Microsoft, and he will take you into some of the interesting elements of the technical side.
Super, thanks Mark, that's great. Hi everyone, great to be talking with you today. So as Mark mentioned, we've gone through an ADS process there, which has really given us a good understanding of the business need and the challenge and opportunity the organization is facing. And at this stage, because this is an IoT solution, we obviously need to start talking about the devices themselves. And some of the important elements we need to discuss are the actual environment the devices will be used in, the devices and sensors. There might be specific certifications that are required for those devices. They might have access to hardwired power, they might not. So we need to think about low power communication technologies to actually move the data from sensor to device to up into the cloud. Many solutions now are hybrid. So many organizations do want to have processing on the edge, maybe to filter data, maybe to run machine learning models to get inferences and take action very quickly where it's needed. And that, of course, drives the compute footprint of the device itself. You might need to optimize for running AI models and need GPU or VPU on the edge. And of course, security is incredibly important. And for this, we need to ensure that the device has some kind of root of trust. We need to be able to update the operating system on that device, because if you can't update a device, you can't secure it. So we always spend a lot of time talking about the devices themselves and what's needed. Once we've got some of these elements in place, we take that work that Mark mentioned earlier, especially with the personas here on the right-hand side, and we've got a good idea of what the physical devices are on the left-hand side. And we start to put components into a conceptual architecture to understand what things we need to build to realize the solution. Mark mentioned the Lambda architecture there with different types of storage, and you can see we've got a warm storage and cold storage in here. Cold storage is where we would store a lot of data, and then our data scientist is going to use that data to come up probably with the insights and the machine learning models that we're going to use later on in the solution. You'll notice at this conceptual architecture stage, we're not using product names or terms. So we keep things very high level, and this enables everyone in the team who's discussing the solution to be able to contribute without them having to know the technical details of services that we're going to be using. It's important to give some really good descriptions of what these components are going to do, and we talk about the required capabilities of these components to realize the use cases. So for example, here we know we want some warm storage, and we're going to use this for holding data that's relevant to a journey that the container goes through. So we can query that later on. We can talk about some of the options for these components, and there are many options. There are lots of different storage options we could use in Azure, and we'll use the required capabilities and some of the other constraints and requirements that have been discussed to help us zoom in on what are probably the best choices here. We talked about the history report creation a little bit, and this is where we know we're going to need, for example, maybe up to 60 days, because that's the typical journey length or max journey length for a container. So we know we're going to need at least 60 days worth of information. So we could use IoT Central as the heart of this solution, but we know straight away that because IoT Central only holds a rolling 30-day window, we know we're going to need an external data store to export that data to, so we can create our history reports to show the conditions the containers have been working in. So that's obviously a very important architectural driver. As we move deeper into the technical design, we will get more specific about those data store choices, as I've mentioned earlier, and also think about whether there is a requirement for multi-tenancy, for example, isolate data for a specific customer, but hold multiple customers' data on the same solution instance. And we've talked a little bit about security on the device itself. And as we move into the later two phases, we'll start to create a logical architecture where we are now showing some of the technologies that we intend to use in the solution. So this one here is using IoT Hub as the heart, and we've connected it up to the device provisioning service and a logic app with our existing ERP system that the customer has that holds the asset data for the devices, that's going to drive that device provisioning process, and some of the services in here that represent the realization of the use cases. I have included an example as well using IoT Central, and you can see that IoT Central as a component itself has multiple Azure services within it. When you stand up IoT Central, it stands up 30 Azure services underneath the covers. So IoT Hub, DPS, time series insights, etc., etc. And we've done all the engineering work as Microsoft to glue those services together and turn IoT Central into a fully ready SaaS solution with high availability and scalability built in. So you don't need to worry about that part. And here we are still exporting that data out and using Power BI here as the dashboarding tool to get those data insights for a time period greater than the 30 days that IoT Central has by default. The reason we're talking so much about IoT Central now is that many organizations want to explore IoT, but it's been traditionally quite difficult to get into IoT. It's difficult. People are nervous about security and the amount of investment required. And so what we want to do with IoT Central is make it much easier for organizations like yourselves to investigate IoT and then use IoT Central as a building block and build upon that as your use cases and feature requirements grow. As I mentioned, IoT Central is a fully functioning SaaS platform, but you can also extend it by using the continuous data export and API features that we have in there. So out of the box very quickly, especially if your sensors are using the plug and play protocol, you can very quickly and within minutes set up your screens and dashboards and have those devices connected. and also perform device management operations as well, sending messages back to the devices as well as getting telemetry in from them. So thinking about IoT Central as the core of the solution, these are all the features that are built in that we've created for you as Microsoft in this SaaS solution. And here are all those services that are contained underneath the covers within it. And these mechanisms here are how you can expand that solution as your needs grow. So you can export that data, run additional processing on them, pull that data into modern data platforms, do long-term analysis, and also integrate with other companion app experiences as well. And it's really good to think about the different personas who would interact with these. Perhaps your device management people would use IoT Central, and some of your end users like the COO that Mark mentioned probably just want a straightforward dashboard that you've created in Power BI. They don't need to know about the devices themselves. And to make this initial experience as easy as possible, we've partnered with a company called Rigardo who have really embraced the Azure IoT plug-and-play protocol, and they've put these devices in our Azure Device Catalog and put together a number of kits where you can pick sensors that are relevant to you and within minutes connect them to the gateway and then into IoT Central and start interacting with those devices and getting business value straight away. So this is part of the IoT Kickstart as an optional extra to enable you to pick sensors and very quickly get an IoT solution up and running. And with that, I'm going to hand you back over to Chris.
Great, thank you, Rich. So I have the pleasure of talking you through the IoT Kickstart Programme that Rich has just mentioned. That was a fantastic segue. So in terms of the IoT Kickstart Programme, as you can see on the screen, this is a programme that Grey Matter has jointly created with the team from Microsoft on today's call. It provides a series of Grey Matter co-funded technical and commercial professional services. These services enabling organizational adoption of IoT when looking to digitally transform. And that's whether they're creating net new revenue streams or adding value to existing propositions. This is made up of 6 stages, from identifying opportunities to leverage IoT within your organization in ideation, furthering your understanding of what's possible with IoT and discovery, defining your business model and creating a blueprint for technical adoption and design, confirming that design, both environmental architecture and business model in the assess stage, then optionally, as Rich said, deploying that environment into a proof of value infrastructure in Azure. And then lastly, the review stage is agreeing appropriate technical adoption and go-to-market next steps. How do we achieve that? Sorry, just a slide ahead. We essentially, across each of those stages, we lay out our professional services offerings over those through the IoT Kickstart Programme journey. The next few slides, I'm going to take you through, dive deeper into each service and what you can expect. So in the ideation stage, we have an ideation session. This 60-minute call with Grey Matter, Microsoft, and the commercial and technical leads within your organization is to understand is to help us understand your intentions and the opportunities for IoT within your organization and within your respective fields. Next is discovery phase, delivered on a one-to-few basis. Our IoT immersion workshop, delivered by one of our Grey Matter Azure architects, will help you gain deeper understanding of the art of the possible with Azure IoT, building off of this initial call today. Next is the design stage, and this comprises really of 2 components. First, we'll go deeper in terms of discussing your proposed business model, how that captures value through the delivery of our and how that captures value through delivery of our half-day business model workshop. During this workshop, we'll discuss and capture your business model using the Strategizer Canvas methodology, and this will help us work with you to better define that business model's desirability, feasibility, viability, and adaptability. Then next up the second part of that is our Azure Design Service delivery, which Mark and Rich have done a great job in covering in detail. As an added note, these will be delivered by our Azure certified IoT experts within Grey Matter, and they'll work with you to scope your architecture, adoption roadmap, and identify any skilling requirements. All of these in consideration of your business drivers, aspirations, and people, as Mark has mentioned. Then next is the assess phase, and this is again made up of two parts. First is the follow-up to the business model workshop, where we reconvene to discuss the validation activity that you've performed post business model workshop to confirm your business model as well as value proposition. We use this to identify opportunities to pivot based on those findings. We'll additionally use this session to begin to identify opportunities to leverage Microsoft and Grey Matter co-sell based on your aspirations. This can include such things as Microsoft Marketplace offer creation. Then similarly, we'll do a follow-up to the Azure Design Service. We'll spend this time reviewing the output of the Azure Design Service in terms of those findings and that recommended blueprint, as well as agreeing those appropriate next steps in terms of your Azure adoption. That can include the next step, the deploy, which is the proof of value deployment to Azure based on, as I say, based on that blueprint. The execution of this will take place between Grey Matter's Microsoft Azure Architect, as well as yourselves, to aid your familiarity with the platform and the Azure services being implemented. The price of this is shown on the screen is inclusive of the Regado Presto kit. However, we'll work with you to identify most appropriate sensors during that Azure Design Service. Then lastly is the review stage. This will be a call with all program key stakeholders. We'll review your program involvement and agree the appropriate next steps when it comes to technical adoption and go-to-market. As part of the 6 stages of the program, you'll receive 5 days worth of professional services from Grey Matter, which would equate to £5,000. I mentioned when kicking off, this is a Grey Matter co-funded program, and the investment that we're asking from you, participation in this program, is only £2,500. So we're discounting this. We're investing rather in this program. If you're interested in the optional proof of value deployment, the total investment required is £6,700, but that increases the number of professional services days up to 9. As you can see on the screen, we are limiting participation in the program to 5 companies per quarter. And although the program is limited, components can be delivered on an individual basis where needed. So where we talked about the Azure Design Service, if that's something that's of particular interest to you, this can be delivered on an ad hoc basis. If you are interested in taking part in the program, there is a link on the screen. But additionally, as I click next, if you click on the link on the screen, you should be able to go through to the program application form, but this will additionally be shared with everybody who's attended in follow-up today. Okay, so in effort to wrap things up before we move into Q&A, what I wanted to do is just make you aware of a couple of upcoming events that the team here at Grey Matter will be running. So first and foremost is our ISV Partner Day. If you're not already signed up for that, and I'm probably remiss in saying the next steps of engagement once you've completed the form will be to attend a virtual ideation session as part of ISV Partner Day. Obviously, if you're not attending our ISV Partner Day, if not, why not? We will run ad hoc ideation sessions as and when needed. But ISV Partner Day is a 3-track event: business, developer and platform, where we talk about all things Microsoft partnership related in the business track, all things developer related in the developer track, as you'd expect, so Visual Studio, Azure DevOps, and then in the platform track, we very much focus on Azure architecture excellence. So we've got a number of sessions focused on that. Next up, Grey Matter team will be attending Southwest Summit on the 16th of October in Southampton. Please register using southcoastsummit.com. It's a community-focused event, so there's lots of speakers from Microsoft as well as other specialists from experts. And then lastly, very much tied to the IoT theme, IoT and mapping we believe go hand in hand in terms of location services. We have a webinar coming up on the 2nd of November, the location of things with Microsoft Maps. So please do feel free to sign up and join us to any of those. Lots of great content and information shared across each of those. So on that note, Q&A. So any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A section. Respective speakers, thank you very much for your time, Ella, Mark, Rich, Mark. Very much appreciate it. Very interesting session today. We hope everybody that attended found it as useful certainly as I did. But yeah, any questions, do feel free to use Q&A.